Today on AeroTime, we are delighted to welcome Erika Armstrong, who joins us to take part in our Women in Aviation campaign. She is an airline and business aviation captain, aviation professor, speaker, and vice president of business development at the Advanced Aircrew Academy. Erika has worked in all aspects of aviation for over 25 years, including as a captain on the Boeing 727. Her passion for the industry extends beyond the flight deck. She's also a published author and editor who has written for several national aviation magazines. Her recent book, A Chick in the Cockpit, received rave reviews following its publication in November 2015. Erika is also active on social media, where she shares her perspective on the industry to an audience of over 400,000 aviation enthusiasts. Erika, thank you so much for joining us here at AeroTime.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great. Now, I just mentioned it, so let's start with your book, A Chick in the Cockpit. It gives a glimpse into what you described as unexpected turbulence in a world still ruled by men. What message were you trying to get across through the book, and what was the reason behind you writing it?
Well, there's lots of them, many layers of the reason why I wrote it, primarily because there's a lot of books about women pilots, but not a lot of books written by women pilots, simply because there's not a whole lot of pilots out there yet. So I kind of wanted to bring people into the cockpit with me and share a few stories, especially women. I know for me growing up, I never ever thought about becoming a pilot. I just didn't know any women pilots. So I just wanted to, kind of bring down the facade that you can't get into the cockpit. And then I'm an avid reader. When I was flying for the airlines, I was based in 6 cities in 2 years. So I spent all my time, either flying the airplane or waiting for an airplane or riding on an airplane. So I used to read a book every week. So I have a passion for reading and writing, and thought this would be a fun thing to do. The story itself, the heroes of the story are a book club. So lots of different layers. And then I always include discussion questions at the end of the book. So book clubs have topics they can talk about that wrap back into the real world for any industry. So even though this is about a woman pilot, this applies to almost every industry out there, especially for working moms and all the challenges they have. We all have excuses to fail. So I just wanted to show a story where there are some obstacles and just, you don't have a choice. You just have to find a way to get around it. So that was kind of the point of it.
Great. Sounds like it's an awesome message. Are you continuing that theme in your new book? Because of course you've got a second book on the way.
Yeah, I'm picking away at it. So the next one is very different. It's more of a compilation of stories about how to be a successful pilot, but it's done through stories. It's hard to teach what makes a good pilot. There's all these nuances because it's not just about flying airplanes, especially when you come up into the crew environment. You have to be locked in a box with other people, strangers that you've never met before, all different personality types, but you still have to operate at this high level. And so how do you do that? How do you communicate? How do you, keep your wits about you when everything's going crazy? So just kind of a fun way and fun platform of demonstrating how to do that.
Sounds great. Sounds like it should be required reading for some CRM courses.
Well, I hope so.
And so going to your social media channels now, you've got over 400,000 people who follow you, as I mentioned. Did you set out to garner that many followers, or did it sort of happen without you really sort of knowing about it?
Well, I hate to admit this, but many years ago, I hated social media. I didn't like the idea of it because I think people change when they get on the screen and they can anonymously type things in. For the most part, everybody is very positive on social media, but you still have those trolls out there. So I used it sparingly. But then when I wrote the book, I pitched my book the old-fashioned way. I got an agent who pitched to the publisher. And the agent said, okay, I love your story. I love what you're trying to do, but I won't take you on unless you build your social media platform. So I kind of begrudgingly started doing it, but I started realizing the power of social media. And I thought, well, if I can use this for the good and for the good of the industry, I'm just going to, pick away at it. So the social media machine is a hungry monster. It needs to be fed every single day. So I just learned the right balance of bringing new content into the stream, and also having some fun in putting on the filter of humor for all the topics that are out there. We're all struggling to get through this world, right? So we got to have some fun. The strange thing is, when I started actually expressing my opinions on social media, that's when my following started to actually build. And I know for a lot of women, expressing their opinions and their ideas out there so publicly is hard to do. But I noticed once I started doing it, it actually engaged the audience. They started having true conversations, and it's an amazing thing that has changed over the last 15 years. So our whole worldwide society has changed from it. So I wanted to be at least a positive voice out there. We have lots of people following the Kardashians. I wanted to be able to show everyone, including my teenage daughters, that you can still be smart and intelligent and still have followers. So I'm trying to change that image.
That's great. Sounds like a very, very worthwhile cause. And on your social media platforms, what's been the best question that anybody has asked you, and what was your answer to that?
I get so many questions daily, but I've noticed that recently there's a little bit of a theme to the questions, and it's a little bit unusual. And I was trying to pinpoint what has changed in the context, but I think COVID has made us think a little deeper about ourselves, our lives, how quickly life can be taken away. I think people have had this moment locked inside to pause and say, okay, what's truly meaningful to me? So I've had a lot of people who are in their 40s, even early 50s, saying, hey, I've always wanted to fly. Is it too late? Can I still, finish out my career as a pilot? Can I earn a living at it at this age? And the reality is, yes, you can. It's amazing because there are so many niches in aviation. We kind of slap our blinders on, think, a pilot is only an airline pilot, but there are so many jobs out there. There's 65 million jobs associated with aviation. So it's not just being a pilot, but I think the older you are, the more ready you are to learn, especially as a pilot. When you're in the airplane, you're not supposed to be learning. You're supposed to be proving what you've already learned on the ground. Some of these older pilots that enter in, they are so ready to learn. They accelerate and go so much faster than the younger students. Within just a year and a half, 2 years, they're already ready up to step into the professional pilot realm. So it takes a lot of self-discipline. I think the older people have that. And there are so many opportunities in business aviation, and those business aviation flight departments are looking for that mature person who can handle unusual schedules, and know how to work with people, because that's half the battle. So for anybody that's younger, of course, that's my niche. But some of the people that are asking as an older age, you're never too old to get your pilot's license. As long as you're mentally and physically capable, go for it.
Amazing. That's great advice. That's great advice. And talking back to coming back to something you said earlier about how there weren't many female role models for you, and that was one of the reasons behind writing the book. What do you think needs to happen to increase the number of female role models in the aviation industry?
Yeah, I know people are frustrated. We look at the numbers. I think still, as far as ATP, airline transport pilots, I think it's still at 1.7%. There's about 7% of airline pilots in total that are women. So it's getting better. And I know people are frustrated about it, but it takes time. Unfortunately, it takes a change of perspective, and that usually will happen with a generation change. So our kids growing up are going to be used to seeing women flying. I know when we've made it, when we don't see headlines anymore saying, oh, the first all-female flight crew flew this and that and that. It'll just become common occurrences. But I think that even 100 years from now, we're still not going to see a 50-50 split. I still think that the industry itself, the nature of the beast, is just going to not attract quite as many women as men. But I see, there's a lot more men now that are used to flying with women. They don't even think twice. When it first started happening, I kind of felt bad for them because I was so used to flying with men and they weren't used to flying with women. So I'd walk in the cockpit and you could instantly see them go, how do I act? What do I say? Can I tell a dirty joke? Can I laugh? They were on edge. So I actually had the power in that situation, only because I was so used to it. So, but they got used to it. They realized at some point that I'm just another person, doing the same thing they are, have the same passion for aviation. So it just takes time. It takes exposure, and just having female pilots and leaders out there talking about it, talking about the good and the bad in the industry, making sure that the next generation is prepared for this life, both men and women. But the reality is we still have different challenges. But so it's important to talk about that so people aren't disillusioned when as they progress. So just think how different your life is and how different your happiness level was between your teens and to moving into your 20s and 30s. And for me, my 40s and coming up, how different the challenges are. So be able to talk about it, having platforms where you can reach out and ask questions is very important. So I love, having conversations like this, so that we can at least talk about it and say, yeah, of course we're going to have challenges, both men and women. But here's where you go if you have a question and how to get around that barrier.
Great. And so going back to the beginning for you, what inspired you to want to become a pilot and to join the industry, given that, as you've said, there were so few female role models around?
I'm an accidental pilot. I became a pilot by accident. I really did. Growing up, I remember career day in my elementary school that they would split us up. The boys would go in one room, the girls would go in the other room. And so they put these ideas in our head young as to what our goals could be in life. So I had never thought about it. So I was in college. I was struggling to pay my rent and tuition, and I was already working 2 jobs. So all I was doing was looking for a job that had really crappy hours, and the airport's open 24/7, 365. So there was an opening at the front desk of a FBO. It's a fixed base operator. It's just a place where all the corporate aviation aircraft come in, they get fueled. Their pilots come in and get their catering services. So the front desk person does all that and helps them get hotels and rental cars. And so anyways, I was able to find a shift that worked for me, and I just started learning about the industry. It has its own language, its own sound, its own sight, its smells. I mean, the personalities that come through the door. So I started learning about it, and then just working with the line guys. They were all taking flying lessons and hearing their stories, and I was helping them study in the evenings after everybody had gone home. We're just doing our paperwork. And I realized, okay, if I break it down, this really isn't rocket science. This is, all logical stuff. So I took one flying lesson next door, and I was hooked. Never looked back. So just a random chance. And so that's why I'm so much of an advocate to get the word out there so that you don't have to accidentally find out about it. In the olden days, we used to have air shows all the time. And before 9/11, the airports, general aviation airports, were open. People would open up their hangar doors, and the old codgers would sit out in their lawn chairs and tell stories and talk to the new pilots. And so some of that has gone away. So we have to find a different way to make that reach. So doing what we're doing today is one way to do it.
Amazing. And in terms of getting your license, I mean, I'm guessing you were probably one of the only women who were learning how to fly at the school, maybe at the time. But did you encounter any challenges or barriers in terms of getting your license, and then when you started your career as a pilot, and in terms of being accepted?
So this is really weird because I was so lucky. When I walked over to that flight school, they had just hired one of their first female flight instructors. And so it was serendipity that I was actually got to be one of her very first students. So I got to fly with her, and then I got my private and instrument with her, and then we kind of lost touch. And about 7 years later, I was the captain on a 727, and she walked in the door, and she was my first officer. So it was so wonderful to have my flight instructor be my first officer. But as far as the challenges, and yeah, so let's admit it, there's going to be sexual discrimination. It's going to be that element that's always there in any industry. The misogynists are out there, they're alive and well. When you do come across them, they are truly terrifying. They, especially in aviation, they are a safety factor, because if they're hating somebody just merely because of their gender, they have higher issues than just that. So when somebody is not trying to work with you in the cockpit, it's a safety factor. So, there's no blanket answer on how to deal with them. The only thing I can say is that you will run across them. The best thing to do is reach out to the other people around you to get that support. Every situation is going to be different, so you're going to have to slap on your own intuition on how to deal with it. But just, things that would come across. I still remember when I was on the 727 and in the flight simulator, one of the other pilots there that I didn't particularly care to fly with, he was just an angry person, but we were doing engine failure cuts, V1 cuts, we call them in the sim, and you have to instantly step on the correct rudder to make sure you can maintain control. And I always loved doing it. I was always really good at it, but now I'm flying with this person. I'm like, what is going on? I'm fighting the rudders. Well, what he was doing was he was down there pushing on the incorrect rudder on purpose. So, you're going to run across these little snide little things, and, you're just going to have to just take a deep breath, put a little filter of humor on it and try to correct the situation. So in this case, I made light of it. I just talked to the flight instructor and I said, hey, I just want to let you know this is happening. I'm not going to say anything to him. I want you to pay attention. So when it happened again, the examiner in the cockpit, he just told the other guy, he said, put your feet on the floor. He goes, I can see what you're doing. So I know in that case that the situation was corrected, right? There was no more drama after that. So, just a little subtle corrections will make a big impact, I think, for some of these people. So, but if you need any help, you can always reach out to me. My email's out there. Just drop a note and I'll see what we can do for you.
That's great. I'll definitely be taking you up on that. Now, I want to turn to a very much more a sad part of your life. In 2019, your life was turned upside down when you were involved in a traffic accident, when a drunk driver crashed into you. Now, obviously, that had huge repercussions for your medical, which is one of the most important things a pilot has, or so my instructors have told me, is to do everything you can to protect that medical. This was all of a sudden ripped away from you. So can you tell us a bit about that experience, how you got through that massive shock to your career, and how you use it to sort of help other people now?
Yeah, it reminds me, especially because I'm teaching at a university, to remind my students to have a backup plan. Every 6 months, you could lose your career in aviation. You're always going to get your flight physical. You're always trying to pass check rides. So at any moment, pilots need a higher level of being in the world. We have more opportunity to be taken out of our job because of physical issues. So yeah, in one split second, my entire life turned upside down. So, the crazy thing is that aviation will teach you that you don't have a choice to make decisions and move forward, right? If you're up at 35,000 feet and you're having an engine failure, you don't have the time to just say, okay, I'm not going to deal with this right now. So it teaches you to just, look at the situation and say, okay, I can't do anything about it, but I can control the crash, right? I was able to still remain in aviation, coming back into business aviation, into that world, and still being around it and surrounding myself in it. And then, trying to deal with any of the physical things that I can do to try to get myself back into the cockpit again, learning a lot about, health and what are the challenges for pilots, what kind of things will kick you out of the cockpit, and what can you do about it. It's changed quite a bit. In the past, things like diabetes was a no-go, but now people are learning how to manage it. So I do love hearing the other stories of people that have had medical challenges. They have their the medicals taken away and then getting them back. So, I at least want to get my third class so that I can come back into general aviation and at least do that. So I'm thankful that I had the experience and the broad range of aviation interaction that I could continue in the industry in some regards. So, but it's also a reminder to remind my students, even though I teach at an aviation university, to make sure you always help support that other passion that you have, so that you do have a fallback plan. So just always have that what if answer for you, so that it's not so devastating.
Great. And I'm really getting a sense from speaking to you that so much of your life and your energy and your commitment goes into providing support and education and mentoring for women and men. What sort of drew you to that, and why is it so important to you?
Aviation is an amazing career. I mean, it is all encompassing. It changes the core of who you are. And I know you're a commercial pilot, so I know that you soloed and that you've had that moment of being off the earth and looking down on it all by yourself. And that changes you. It changes how you look at the world, literally and figuratively. But it gives you that self-confidence and that smirk in your smile for the rest of your life. So even though it's been taken away, that element of it, that core of being a pilot still remains with me. And we are losing pilots exponentially, just not coming into the career. Over the last 20 years in the United States, in 1980, we had about 827,000 licensed pilots. Now it's down to about 660 some thousand pilots. So that's just all pilots in general, sport, aviation. Thankfully, we have a good general aviation industry, but there are fewer and fewer people coming into the industry. I think the industry itself has had so many challenges. So the people that have come through aren't recommending it to the next generation. I think they get burned out. The airlines have been treating them really poorly, but it's turning around because we are losing that number of pilots coming in. So airlines are learning how to treat their pilots better, business aviation, all sorts of different incentives. So the other problem is that we're not catching pilots soon enough. We're not talking about it until they're coming into college. By then, they've already kind of set in their mind what they want to do. And there's so many other things out there to do. My daughter's just going to college for the first time, and I was looking at her course catalog. There are so many cool things out there now. I can, they're just being pulled in different directions. So my passion is to make sure we reach back and help mentor the next generation, talk about what it involves and how wonderful it truly is. And you can't be wonderful unless you have all those mentors to help you through.
Yeah. And so what would you say is the main sort of barrier for people getting into the aviation industry, and how would you like to encourage the younger generation to think about the aviation industry for their futures?
So throughout the ages and in the future, money is always going to be the first barrier. It's always been expensive, but it kills me to know that millions of dollars in scholarship money just go unused. They aren't applying for them. So there are tons of them out there. I know some of them are just dribs and drabs a little bit at a time, but it adds up. I could never have finished up my college unless I had gotten a scholarship. So they're out there. There's lists out there. I try to post them all the time on LinkedIn. So, if that's the only barrier right now, there are ways around it. The second barrier, especially for women, is just perception that you can't do it. In the United States, we've been really pushing these STEM programs back to science, and I love that idea. But the irony is, when I'm talking to my students, they actually have now a perception that you have to be in these programs to come into the pilot world. It's not the case. My best students, don't tell anybody this, but they don't get A's in my class. The best students are actually the ones that, a multiple choice test doesn't bring out what their true abilities are. You still have to study and you have to pass these tests and get through college, but the ones that actually thrive in aviation are the ones that they want to learn. They want to pay attention. They are good with people. They're willing to listen. They don't put up the wall of I know everything. They're just, happy people that want to get along with other people. And so the talents of being a pilot, of course, is, self-discipline, study. You still have to have a basic knowledge, but the reality is it's mostly common sense. So when you're sitting in your math class, boring math class, going, why am I learning this? Just know that you're learning that so that you learn how to learn. That's basically what it is. So yeah, I think our own self-perceptions when we're younger about it being too difficult is the other barrier that we can help break.
Great. And you spoke there about your students. So that's your role as aviation professor at the Metropolitan State University of Denver. What do you enjoy most about that job?
So I work at a university that has a lot of returning students. I have adult learners, and then I have people coming right out of high school. So I have a lot of people that have already had a full military career, and then they decided to use their GI Bill and learn how to fly, and actually thinking about going back into the military as a pilot. So I love those days where I have a 50-year-old student sitting next to an 18-year-old student, and just seeing the different generations side by side, but still connecting on the same level. And the second thing I love is years later, I will have students send me their pictures as they progress. One of them just got their commercial. One of them is flying a fighter jet. So years later, seeing that they were able to maintain that track and their excitement for it, and that they think of me years later and want to share that joy. So yeah, that's the reward. It's definitely not pay, that's for sure. So, and I just do that on the side. That's my give back to the community. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, mentoring it and talking about it, and I wanted to actually do something, so this was my way to do it. And yeah, and you know, COVID's been a challenge, but it's also forced us to learn how to teach on different levels. So I'm sure it would scare the world to know that we're teaching pilots all via the internet right now, but it's helped us accelerate the technology, and I love that. So that now we do have the flexibility to teach online and on campus, and that allows my students then to fly more. So they actually like the platform that we can do both.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about how COVID has impacted you over the last year, and whether you've drawn any positives out of it. You've already spoken about one of them, the benefits of all the different ways of teaching. Yeah, so how has it impacted you, and what other benefits have you found over the last year?
Yeah, so I'm in business aviation with Advanced Air Crew Academy, and business aviation has been thriving. It's just been completely the opposite of the airlines. So we've just, you know, there was a lull in the beginning while the world was trying to grapple with what was going on and how, you know, how are we going to move forward during this? So we were prepared because, of course, we were already an e-learning platform. So flight department said, okay, this is a great time to spend some time training. You know, a lot of the pilots that were grounded then started doing all the recurrent training and getting ramped up. But in the meantime, we had about a 10-week lapse where everybody wasn't really moving. Then business aviation said, okay, we're going to find a way to get through this, and they started going. So they've been accelerating and adding aircraft, and they've been thriving. So a lot of those corporations that normally would maybe fly first class I have decided just to charter airplanes, and they're finding that, hey, it's almost the same price. If they fill up a corporate jet, that price per ticket can be equivalent to flying the airline. So it's introduced a lot of those people into corporate aviation, and I think they're going to find, now that they've been there, that they're never going to leave. So it's still a small percentage when you look at the big traveling public, but it'll have a little bit of an impact on the first class flying at the airlines.
For sure, it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of an airline industry emerges out of this crisis, I think.
Yeah.
And what would you say has been the most important aspect of your aviation career to date? And what do you still have on your to-do list?
So I took one glider flight. There's one up up by the mountains, the foothills of the mountains up here in Colorado. So that's on my bucket list. I still want to get my glider rating at some point. So I've got to get that medical, at least to that level. Yeah, there's so many things on the bucket list that it just makes me get out of bed every morning to try to do. So as far as even the traveling part of it, aviation took me everywhere. Business aviation took me, I got to fly down to Australia and all over the South Pacific, and just that ability to have somebody else pay for my traveling and my experiences, what a wonderful opportunity. So yeah, my bucket list is long. I'd like to ride along with Richard Branson sometime. So and that's the next thing too, is watching the sub and supersonic flight come back again. Gosh, we haven't had anything since the Concorde. I can't believe how long it's been. We went from the Concorde to these big, giant, oversized aircraft. Aircraft engineering, that philosophy changes with the economy. It doesn't quite keep up with it, but we're ready for New York to London in 3.5 hours, right? And we're ready for it. So I think that'll be next, and I'd love to be part of some of that.
Amazing, amazing. So what do you think has been the biggest change that you've seen in aviation during your career? And what is one thing that you would like to see change in the next 10 years?
Technology, hands down. I mean, what we can do now, it's incredible. It has amplified safety 1,000-fold, but then we kind of reach that teeter-totter point where automation becomes so much that when the pilots lose that automation, we lose those basic core reflexes. So I think sometimes the industry automates things that we don't necessarily need. I think we need to go back and rethink how we use technology and automation. At the end of the day, at the end of that moment, the pilot should have ultimate authority over any system on that aircraft, because basically, if we have everything go bad, the only thing we need is airspeed and an attitude, right? So, the MCAS was a great example of what we were trying to do, trying to make that aircraft safe and override the pilot's inputs. And in that regard, when that one little element failed, especially because the pilots didn't know it was there, it was super easy to disconnect MCAS. They just didn't realize what it was and what was happening, that type of automation. So it taught us an important lesson that we need to go back and say, okay, there are an infinite number of variables, and ultimately the pilot is going to have a better idea at that moment, and they need to just take over control of that aircraft. So the automation is what's changed everything, having GPS and flying direct. The other thing I'm seeing is these amazing fuel efficient, powerful engines. Just even in the last 10 years, climate is a big concern. And the airlines have done an amazing, engine manufacturers have done an amazing job, not necessarily out of the goodness of their heart, because fuel efficiency means more money, right? If we can fly a route with spending less money in fuel, that's amazing. So alternative fuels are out there. Jet engines can use them right now, as is, no conversion. But the problem then is taking food out of the supply chain. So that, that's another issue too. So I think the one thing that I would like to see is more supersonic flight. I love the technology that they're trying to delay the shock wave of the sonic boom. So there's a whole cool technology there. They've found a way to delay it past Mach 1. I know there's a way out there to do it. So those are the things that are on the horizon that the pilots that are starting right now, hopefully will get to fly a few years from now.
Amazing. Well, it's an amazing time to be part of this industry. It's been absolutely great to speak to you. Erika, that brings us to the end of this interview, but not the end of our time together. I want to say a big thank you to you for your time and for sharing your thoughts and experiences and all of your advice for everyone. I'm going to hand over now to Richard Stevenson, the Chief Executive of AeroTime, and he wants to say a few words.
Victoria, thank you so much indeed for that interview. And Erika, thank you so much for joining AeroTime today to share your thoughts and also your inspiration with people all around the world. And I really do know that there'll be lots of people listening to you who will be inspired to continue with their aviation career and also to enter the aviation sector in the future. So thank you so much for everything you've done, for everything you continue to do. And I know that I speak on behalf of everybody here at AeroTime in really wanting to recognize your dedication, your perseverance, your efforts towards education and educating those aspiring aviators of the future, and for everything else you do to encourage people generally. And in the conversations that you and I have had, I can assure you, you've energized me and you've encouraged me. And I just think that that is something that is worthy of recognition. And just listening to you, listening to that interview, your conversation with Victoria, it is very clear that your level of passion for our industry is absolutely off the charts. And when we were talking with the team here, they were very keen that I should tell you that we think your passion level is just off the charts, because it really is inspirational listening to you. And it's not just me saying that, it's the whole team here who has interacted with you over the last few months in organizing this interview. So with all of that in mind, it is my very great pleasure to virtually present you with an AeroTime Aviation Achievement Award.
Oh, very nice. Oh, I love it. Thank you, guys.
You're very welcome. And I have to do this virtually, obviously, because of COVID. I would love to do nothing better now than jump on a jet and come over there and present this to you in person. And maybe one day I will be able to do that. But this award is made by the global executive team here at AeroTime. And I just want to read the citation to you. And it says, presented to Erika Armstrong in recognition of her dedication and contribution to the aviation sector, for her perseverance and leadership, for her work to improve aviation safety, for educating the next generation of pilots and encouraging them to pursue their dreams. The AeroTime Global Executive Committee recognizes the positive influence of these efforts and the significance of the impact on the aviation industry and its people, both today and into the future. So Erika, congratulations on your award. Thank you so much again for everything you do for our industry. I'm really looking forward to meeting you at some point in the future, and I know that we'll have that opportunity soon, and I will be able to present this to you in person. But Erika, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on your award, and we will make sure we get that to you and the trophy that goes with it just as soon as we possibly can.
It's a deal. I'll buy you a beer and you can give me the award. That's a good exchange. So I'm looking forward to it. Yep, I got my vaccination. I'm ready to go. Let's get the world going again. And thank you so much for doing this and having the conversation and helping me get the message out, because I couldn't do it unless there was companies like this doing this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to hand back to you, Victoria.
Erika, thank you for joining AeroTime today and for sharing your story and your extraordinary passion for the industry and for all of your motivational and inspirational words. I'm sure that many of our viewers will be looking to get their hands on a copy of your book, maybe even gatecrash one of your lectures now, and and also the next book, of course, which is called The Art of Being a Pilot. And that brings us to the end of this AeroTime interview. Stay tuned for more coming soon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Victoria Bryan, and you've been watching AeroTime. Goodbye.